They sat around the kitchen table, the warmth of the kitchen contrasting with the quiet darkness outside. Macaulay was sitting there, smaller than his 13 years, his hands wrapped around a mug of tea Sue had made for him. He didn't drink it, though, just held it as if for the comfort of something warm in his hands. California watched him, taking in the dirt under his nails, the worn fabric of his too big jacket, the guarded, wary look in his eyes. Sue broke the silence gently, her voice calm and steady. Macaulay, you don't have to tell us anything if you're not comfortable. But if you want to talk, we're here. And we'd like to know more about you. He glanced up at her, then down at the table, a flicker of hesitation crossing his face. But Sue's gaze was warm and open, patient. California recognized the look in his eyes. She'd worn it herself once, when she'd sat across from strangers who were trying to get her to open up. A part of him wanted to trust them, to share, but there was a wall he'd built around himself. The question was whether he was willing to let them in. He took a breath, his fingers tightening around the mug. My dad, he's in prison. Has been most of my life. He got into, I don't know, bad stuff. Stealing, hurting people. He's not a good guy. Sue nodded, her expression softening with sympathy. I'm sorry, Macaulay. That must have been so hard. He shrugged, his face hardening. It's just how things are. Where I come from, it's rough. There's not a lot of hope out there. Some people get out, find work in the casinos, but that's rare. Most just stay. They drink, they fight, they end up like my dad. He paused, a bitter edge creeping into his voice. The reservation's not a place for someone like me. Sue leaned forward, her voice gentle. You mean a kid? He looked away, his face closing off. But then he sighed, seeming to decide to trust her a little. Yeah, it's not a place for kids, not really. The casino jobs are mostly for people who know people. It's not as good as people think. And there's nothing to do but watch people lose themselves. He hesitated, then continued, his voice rough. My mom, she couldn't handle it. She was one of the ones who didn't make it. California exchanged a glance with Sue, who reached out and placed a comforting hand on Macaulay's arm. I'm so sorry, Macaulay, she said softly. No one should have to grow up like that. Macaulay shrugged again, his expression growing even darker. A lot of people out there are like her. There's nothing for people on the res. The casino money doesn't go to us. It goes to the people who run the place, the ones with the power. They say it's for the tribe, but mostly it's for the families that control things. And everyone else, they just survive however they can. He paused, his voice quiet and pained. I know people see the reservation and think it's just some stereotype, like we're all just poor drunks out there, but it's not like that. Not everyone's like that. It's just that that's the only way some people know how to cope. My mom, she tried, She did. But his voice trailed off, and he stared at the table, his jaw clenched. Sue's gaze softened, her heart aching for him. I believe you, Macaulay, and I can't imagine how hard it must have been, seeing all that, living it. For a moment, he didn't respond, but then he nodded, his fingers tapping nervously against the mug. I didn't want to end up like them. I didn't want to be nothing. So I left. Thought maybe if I went somewhere bigger, I could figure something out. He shifted, glancing at California, something like defiance flickering in his gaze. I know people think we're all the same out there. That we're just, I don't know, like we're not worth anything. That's what my dad always said, that we weren't worth the ground we lived on. His voice grew quieter, a bitterness taking hold. Maybe he was right. No, California said firmly, the word coming out sharper than she'd intended. She leaned forward, meeting his gaze with a steady, fierce look. Don't you ever believe that. You're worth just as much as anyone else, Macaulay. More, even. You've survived more than most people ever will. Don't let anyone make you feel less for that. Macaulay looked at her, a flicker of surprise in his eyes, as if no one had ever spoken to him like that. He shifted uncomfortably, but his expression softened, the anger and bitterness receding just a bit. Sue, watching him closely, took his hand in both of hers. I can't pretend to know what you've been through, but I know that feeling, that fear of not being enough. You had it harder than anyone your age should, but you made it here. You're stronger than you think, Macaulay. He looked down, his jaw clenching again, but there was a vulnerability in his expression, a raw openness that hadn't been there before. I don't know. Sometimes it feels like no matter what I do, I'll never get away from it. From what I came from. California swallowed, feeling her own memories surge back. Her first night alone, the fear, the loneliness, the gnawing feeling that the world was ready to chew her up and spit her out without a second thought. She knew, better than most, how deep that feeling ran and how hard it was to claw your way out. You're not alone in that, Macaulay, she said softly, her voice thick with emotion. I get it. I was out there once too, lost, scared, feeling like I didn't have a chance. But you don't have to do this alone, okay? Not anymore. He looked up at her, his gaze filled with something she hadn't seen before. Hope, tentative but real. You really mean that? Sue nodded, a gentle smile spreading across her face. We do, Macaulay. You don't have to go back to that. If you stay with us, we'll be here. We'll help you. They fell into silence, Macaulay's expression softening as he took in their words, the understanding and acceptance they were offering him. California felt a fierce protectiveness rise up within her, a sense that she would do anything to keep him safe, to give him a chance at the life he deserved. After a long moment, Sue spoke again, her voice quiet but firm. I think we should talk to Father Trevors. He'll know what to do next. He's helped a lot of people like us. California nodded, glancing at Macaulay, who still looked cautious, but there was a glimmer of trust in his gaze now, a tentative belief that maybe, just maybe, he'd found somewhere he could finally belong. As they sat in the quiet kitchen, the three of them sharing this unexpected, fragile connection, California knew that their lives had changed. This wasn't just about offering a place to sleep or a meal. It was about building something real, a family out of the broken pieces they each carried. They'd been drawn together, each of them scarred in their own way, each of them looking for something more. And as she looked at Macaulay, she knew she would do whatever it took to make sure he felt safe, that he felt seen, that he felt loved. Tomorrow we'll go talk to Father Trevors, California said softly, meeting Sue's gaze and giving her a small, reassuring smile. But tonight, Macaulay, you're home, for as long as you want to be. Macaulay's face softened, the hard lines easing, and he looked between them, his eyes filled with a mixture of relief and disbelief, as if he were daring to believe that maybe, after all this time, he'd finally found a place to call home.